Welcome back everyone, Oz here, and today I've got some r/petty, pro, and nuclear revenge for y'all. As per usual, I'll be giving you my opinions on each post, and I hope you do the same down in the comments below. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Petty revenge. Bonanza J. Airport justice. Not my revenge, but some justice. I was flying solo in my early 20s at a small airport in Europe waiting to pass through security in the very early morning. Because of the time, the line for security was not too long, maybe 20 people or so waiting. I was only traveling with a large backpack. There was only one agent serving the whole line. There was a couple queued behind me with a big rolling suitcase, which they were pushing in front of them. As the line crawled forward and I took a few steps forward to close the gap, the woman pushing her suitcase rammed it into the back of my legs. At first, I didn't react because accidents happen and I wasn't injured or anything. But then it happened again and again. Every time the line moved and I followed, I would get rammed by their suitcase. I was not slowing them down or in their way, I was literally just ahead of them in line. I chose to walk the path of peace and tried my best to dodge them ramming me, at times just staring at them while they did it. They saw me reacting, they just kept doing it. I did not speak the language they did, but they were basically muttering and grumbling to each other. I'm assuming they were complaining about the wait. But Jesus! Hurting a random stranger won't speed things up. My best guess is they were trying to bait me into a conflict? Who knows? A few times they hit me, I had looked up at the airport agent and made eye contact. I could tell they saw what was happening between me and those assholes. Also, not one person in line had been pulled aside for extra screening. It was finally my turn to go through security. I walked through no problem. Then, got the sweet satisfaction of watching the assholes behind me get stopped and directed into the full search room. In my heart, I felt like the airport agent was getting revenge for me. I'm a level with you guys. It is 100% worth it to invest in TSA PreCheck. It is I spent like $80, like probably, oh god, I gotta renew it soon. Probably 5 years ago, and the amount of time it saves in the airport is 100% worth it. Like, if you get antsy waiting in line for this kind of stuff and, like, the airport stuff stresses you the hell out, it is the best solution for it all. I promise you. You just go to your local Staples, fill out some paperwork, and bada booey, it's all done. Yeah, I'm not kidding. It's usually done like a Staples or an Office Max. Mine was done in a Staples. And it was hella worth it. Compile commit. Cable company kept calling to recharge even after disconnecting service. Book tech support to fix non-existent TV box. This is a repost. Earlier post on petty revenge got removed. Story is from 2021. My old TV finally broke down, so I got a new smart TV. Couple weeks later, I realized that no one in the family watches any TV channels, everyone goes for streaming content. I decided that it's not worth it to pay for the TV connection anymore. Now, my TV connection is added into my phone plan along with my internet as well, so disconnecting it was not straightforward. It was a custom plan with its own dedicated relationship team. It took several calls to the team to find a resolution, which was to convert the TV connection to a prepaid one, and then stop recharging. After the conversation was done, I got messages for a few weeks to recharge, and then finally, a message to return the set-top box. I responded to that, and in a few days, the box was collected from my place. Good riddance, or so I thought. Next started calls from random call centers for recharging. It felt different from the dedicated relationship team. I googled and found out that this had become the practice in my country. The company had outsourced this part of the support to a third party, and they simply checked from the printed database about people who had a connection but did not recharge last month. Since my disconnection was in the middle of the month and their printed database was from the beginning, they did not have this updated info. I tried my best to inform them about this to no avail. Then I started talking to the callers, informing them of the fake problem my TV was having connecting to the set-top box, and that multiple support requests have fallen on deaf ears. Also started recording the calls. Third caller took it seriously and booked tech support. Got a call from a field tech within hours. He came by. I greeted him with drinks and informed him about the real issue. We had a good laugh. He suggested that I keep it up a few more times for good measure. After 8 tech support visits, finally they got the message. Got a call from a supervisor asking why I was booking tech support when clearly I didn't have a connection anymore. I mailed him the call recordings. He was pretty annoyed, but I stopped getting calls so much. Any call I get now, rarely, like once a couple weeks, I just read from the same script, and if someone takes it serious enough to try to book tech support, they get a short note against my ID to not bother this gentleman. What's annoying is that half the time you can't even block the damn number with these tech support call centers because they use like a number scrambler. The amount of times that I've gotten calls from Kyle, Texas, or Rexburg, Idaho, or Salt Lake City, Utah, or Spokane, Washington, or hell, even recently, Arizona, only for it to turn out to be some kind of telemarketer call service or some support line that I've opted out of months ago, is frustrating as hell, because I can't just then block the number, because I'm gonna get called by another number every time. It's always different. It's never been the same one. So it also bypasses my phone's automatic spam detection, which fucking sucks. So yeah, I entirely support fucking with the debt collectors / call centers like this, because it means the technicians get a nice laugh and a nice break and, according to you, some drinks. I assume it's not alcohol. And depending on what their contract is, they probably also get paid for that. So that's pretty cool too. And the supervisor has no one to blame except for the call center, because despite the insistence that they don't have that service anymore, they seem to be more than willing, in the same paragraph, to not only hear, oh, I don't have a box with you guys anymore, but I'm also having a major issue with my box and need it repaired. And they send someone out. The fact that you haven't been removed from their file yet is honestly just... it raises so many questions, and it's just annoying as hell. Petty revenge. Mufasta. Guy with his big SUV for sale. Gets me off, so I call him early. This took place many years ago, but it is a very fresh memory. Wife and I were shopping at IKEA, and when leaving, a giant SUV with a "for sale" sign and a phone number scribbled on it cuts us off in traffic. It was blatant, and we had to hit the brakes hard to avoid hitting them. I asked my wife to take a picture of the phone number, and she did. So, each day, for the next 2 weeks, I would call the number to ask questions of the vehicle once I got to work. Here's where it gets petty. I get to work at 5:30 a.m., so for 9 weekdays, I get every other Friday off. I called the number at 5:30 from a phone far away from my office in a common area. There was no way to tie the calls back to me, as there were many of us arriving around that time too. They stopped answering after 3 days, but I kept calling. Honestly, I don't think I could ever have my phone number on my car, even if it was for a for sale sign, because having that there and then just cutting someone off, even by accident, I don't think I could sleep that night knowing they probably have my phone number. I mean, even without that, all it takes is someone signing you up for a Chewbacca contest or, God knows. R/pro revenge. Fibine. We reversed Gazump to greedy landlord, and it was glorious. Quote, Gazumping occurs when an agent or seller accepts an offer you make to buy a property at an arranged price, but the property is sold to someone else. This usually happens when the vendor sells the property for a higher amount. End quote. This happened 15 years ago, and it's still one of the proudest moments of my life. My best friend and her husband have 5 kids together. They lived in an expensive city and rented an old 4-bedroom house for $400 a week. The house was very run down with a disgusting kitchen and stink drains, but it was all they could afford at the time. Still, they made it work. The owner was a nice old lady who was extremely wealthy and very fond of my friend. She froze the rent for 5 years and promised to let them buy the house once they had saved enough to get a loan from the bank. As she had helped other people in a similar way, they knew they could trust her, and so they saved every cent they could. It took them 5 years, but they finally told her they were ready. 2 days later, the nice old lady passed away, before anything was put in writing. Enter the new owners, the lady's 4 children. Each extremely wealthy in their own right. They inherited a huge portfolio of properties. When they first spoke to my friends, they assured them that the sale would still go through, but they would have to wait until probate had settled. Confident, my friends started making some changes to the place. They started by stripping wallpaper, painting, and making plans. Finally, probate was settled, and the owners agreed to go ahead with the sale for the previously agreed price. My friends applied for the loan, but to their shock, it was refused. The owners had raised the asking price by $80,000 without telling my friends. To make things even worse, the house could be put on the open market. In 7 days, there would be an open house, and with the market the way it was, it would probably sell immediately. My friends were devastated. They might be able to borrow enough, but it would take longer than a week to get. To make matters worse, property prices had soared recently and rents had gone up a lot whilst theirs had been frozen. Not only were my friends going to struggle to get the money, if the place was sold to someone else and they were asked for a higher rent or evicted, it would be nearly impossible to find an affordable place with more than 2 bedrooms. I was scared for my friends, but I was also incandescently angry. Those greedy sods were some of the wealthiest people in this city. They were screwing over a struggling family for less than $20,000 each. They didn't even need the money. It was pure greed, and it was obvious that they'd always planned to do this. So, while my friends scrambled to come up with the money, I started plotting. I looked up advice on what helps make a sale. We needed to make the place as undesirable as possible without making my friends look like bad tenants. Uncluttered. We moved all the furniture in from the walls, added some extra furniture and borrowed ornaments, and hung a lot of motorcycle memorabilia on the walls. The place felt a lot smaller. Smell. My friend boiled a head of cabbage on the stove and we sprayed ammonia around the front and back doors, because it smells like all the neighborhood cats had been marking their territory. We also poured 24 rotten eggs down the drain to make it smell like sewer gas. Neighborhood. We obtained a moldy old couch and dumped it in front of the yard of a neighbor across the road, with permission of course. Neighborhood 2. We started calling friends for help. Anybody with a loud and crappy car was asked to do a few laps in front of the block during the opening day. The street was unusually busy that day. Everyone we knew found a reason to drive by. It was practically rush hour. Neighborhood 3. We called our mates from the rugby club, full contact football without any of that soft padding. A big portion of our club are very large men. The next door neighbor set up a barbecue in their front yard and we offered free food and cheap beer. They came on motorcycles, wearing their roughest gear. There was quite a crowd. A lot of people showed up for the opening day. Quite a few were in and out within minutes. One lady sat in her car and watched the party next door before driving away. The one bloke who stayed any length of time was brave enough to start up a conversation with someone leaving the party. He asked if they were often there and was told every couple of weeks or so they would have an after-party morning and the party the night before was 3 doors up. The partygoer also helpfully mentioned the troublesome drains that are always getting blocked by tree roots and stinking up the place. The potential buyer left without making an offer. So my friends were the only ones to make an offer. They still had to pay more than they'd planned, but not as much as the greedy bastards wanted. My friends signed the papers and paid the deposit that day. So when the brave buyer put in an offer of $30,000 more than my friends, there was nothing the owners could do about it. Strict anti-gazumping laws. I would have loved to see the owners' faces when they found out. For all the people who are saying that they had cheap rent, they didn't. $400 was the rent in 2004, and that was pretty high back then. By the time the lady died, average rent for a house that size had only gone up about $40. Nowadays, 4-bedroom houses in that area go for approximately $800 per week. God, it's crazy to look back at like 2004 prices and just think like, wow, that is definitely before the market started gouging the hell out of the prices. Oh my god. Also, lucky for them for not having an HOA, because this is the kind of stuff that like HOAs will actively try to prevent, because one of an HOA's main goals is essentially to maintain the property value of all the neighbors. And back in the 50s, you can probably connect the dots of one of the ways of maintaining those specific prices. Thankfully, a lot of HOAs nowadays have cleaned up their act, but at the same time, if they did have an HOA, this little scheme would not be possible, and those bastards would have gotten away with it, and that's kind of a shame. And I mean, yeah, they were technically within their right to do this. However, in a moral society, just because you are legally allowed to do something doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. Even though it was almost 2 decades ago, I'm definitely happy that things worked out well for OP's friends. I do wonder if the guy who put the offer down saw through what was going on and realized like, oh, wait a minute. Thank God he was too late. Petty revenge. Stereotypical tattoo. For nearly 2 years, I got up to $1.25 a gallon off of fuel from my husband's asshole of an ex-wife. Background. My husband's ex-wife lives about an hour away from us with their kids, and I would drive them to school on the weeks when they stayed with us. The town they live in has a grocery store with a point system where they can be redeemed for fuel except if it doesn't actually sell fuel. Our town has the same grocery store, and being larger, has the fuel pumps in the parking lot. X is an awful person who worked really hard to alienate the kids from us. I say worked because they're older now and able to see what she's doing. She regularly bought all of her groceries at this particular store specifically for the fuel rewards and would save them up to fill her vehicle in our town when she would make the trip. The rewards card she used had been set up under my husband's old phone number, so I would fuel up, enter the phone number, and drive to my favorite less expensive grocery store. It took about 2 years for her to realize she rarely got any sort of discount and for her to stop shopping there. I was a little bummed, but I was no longer making the drive to school, so it works out. So one, it was under her husband's old number, so that makes things murky, and two, if you don't realize that your points just aren't adding up, especially when the receipt tells you how many points you've earned and, that shit ain't adding up and it's not mathin', the math ain't mathin', that's kind of on you for not realizing, especially when the points are also, directly connected to your ex-husband. I genuinely wonder if it ever crossed her mind on whether or not, oh, maybe my ex-husband is using the fuel points that I've been saving up, or something along those lines. Another one for compile commit, this time more recent. Phone calls for the previous owner, who turned out to be my shitty manager. This is gonna be a long one. Too long didn't read at the end. This could also go in the Am I the Asshole sub. You guys decide. Names have been changed to keep anonymity. Mobile phones became common in my country around 2004, just as I finished high school. My parents bought me my first phone, a second-hand Nokia. It was bulky and basic, but I promised myself that someday I'd buy a new phone with my own money. When college started, I had a 2-hour daily commute. In high school, I had excelled academically and won several district-level awards. These awards were being distributed during my first year of college. One nationalized bank award finally gave me enough money for a new phone. So, I bought a Sony Ericsson K300i, here's your picture, and a premium SIM card, not realizing it had been abandoned by its previous owner. By the third day, I started receiving calls for a guy named Bitsa from various financial institutions. It turned out the number previously belonged to him, and for 20 years, I've been getting these calls. Determined to keep my premium number, I began a routine of blocking wrong numbers. Back then, blocking was device-specific, so each time I got a new phone, I had to start over, keeping a list of numbers to block. I got my first job after graduating in 2009. After 2010, I was assigned to a new project with a notorious reputation for burning people out due to a nefarious project manager named Bits. I didn't know his full name for quite a while. He took pride in making our lives a living hell. Bits ruled with an iron fist. From the moment his team stepped into the office, they were met with a barrage of emails and messages, each more urgent than the last. Bits thrived on creating chaos, often changed project deadlines on a whim, demanding his team work late into the night and through weekends. Bits' presence loomed over every task. He insisted on micromanaging every detail, yet was quick to take credit for any successes, no matter how small. Failures, however, were met with his notorious tirades, publicly berating his team and assigning blame without hesitation. His unpredictable temper kept everyone on edge, afraid to make the slightest mistake. Meetings were another tool in his arsenal of torment. He scheduled them during lunch breaks and after hours, ensuring no one could escape his grasp. These meetings were often pointless, serving only to reinforce his dominance and disrupt any semblance of work-life balance his team might have had. His relentless stream of emails continued around the clock, each carrying a thinly veiled threat: perfection or dismissal. Under his reign, morale plummeted and burnout soared, yet Bits remained oblivious, satisfied only by his complete and total control. I was quite ashamed when I learned that he was from the same area I was and he'd gone to the same school, though years before me. In 2012, our company merged with a parent company. Almost nothing changed personnel-wise, but infrastructure-wise, we got Microsoft Outlook and an organization view. That was when I first learned about Bits from an organizational hierarchy perspective. His full name was an eye-opener. It was Bitsa. Now, the name was common enough, but at the time, mobile numbers had an area-specific pattern, so I already knew that the previous owner of my number was from the same area as me. Still, it could be someone else. I wanted to dig deeper. I talked with an old mentor who lived in the same area and had coached several high school students for the last 2 decades. He confirmed my suspicions. I won't go into the details, but it was evident that Bitsa and Bits were the same person. I'd been quite pissed with this unknown person named Bitsa for almost a decade by then, and Bits had been the bane of my, and several others, existence for quite some time. This is where the revenge lies. First, I unblocked all the numbers on my phone. I was getting 5 to 6 calls daily on average, but after unblocking about 150 numbers, it increased to 15 to 18. My answering strategy changed drastically. Instead of saying wrong number, I politely explained that the owner had changed his number and provided his current number to update their database. This is where I could be the asshole. I volunteered his manager's number in case he tries something else. The fallout was epic. These people had been trying to find him for almost a decade. Banks had sold his debts to companies that harass people for a living to get their money back. It turned out he'd been taking loans in everyone's names, his wife, parents, uncles, aunts, and giving everyone that same number. He was evading credit card debt and loans of upwards of $200K, equivalent in USD, but it's a shitload of money where we're from. Apparently, he had almost 20 cases filed against him, but no one could find him. Probably why he thought he could walk on water. There are multiple versions of what happened at the office when his manager started to get calls about him. He was let go about 2 months later. Haven't heard from him since. Too long didn't read, previous owner of my number had duped several financial institutions. He later turned out to be my shitty boss. I informed the banks of his new number and his manager's number, leaving his career in shambles. Nah, not the asshole here. You're fine. You've been being harassed by these companies for almost a decade at this point in time. He pretty much sold you this number purposefully so that way he could evade them and just kind of disappear. It may have taken 10 years, but it came right back around to bite him in the ass. And ironically enough, if he had just been a nicer person, this probably wouldn't have had to have happened. But because of the fact that he was being an asshole, both with the fact that he had conned multiple financial institutions and dropped the number on you, and with him being a complete asshole in the workplace, things kind of caught up. I do wonder if things would have changed if Bitsa was a bit kinder to his employees. Petty revenge. Zhao Seifler. I hope she enjoys the eggs. First, I have a non-visible disability that sometimes acts up. Today, I went to a grocery store, parked in a handicapped spot. I have the plates, and grabbed a scooter. When I got out of the car, a lady started yelling insults at me for using a spot I'm not entitled to, and got worse when she saw me take a scooter. Going through the store, she kept coming near me and making nasty remarks. The entire time, I ignored her. Finally, I get to the eggs section. I needed several dozen, and the 18 counts are on sale. So I'm going through them to make sure the packages don't have broken eggs. Since I was blocking access to the door, I helped out others with getting their eggs and making sure they didn't have any that were broken. The packages with broken eggs were stacked up on an empty shelf. She comes up and says, "Are there 18 in there?" As if she never heard of checking the eggs for damage, and demanded I get her 2 packages. So I just grabbed 2 packages off the top of the discard pile and gave them to her, and she put them in her cart and went away. When she gets home, she's probably gonna think that you pre-broke the eggs for her and did it on purpose, so just a little bit of a heads up if you ever run back into her. But if she was actively going through the store and harassing you about it and making your life miserable, especially for the fact that not all disabilities are visible, and she should learn that, yeah, that is kind of some justified revenge. It's definitely gonna suck for her, but she deserves it, and that's what matters. Nuclear revenge. Adorable work, 8442. I blew up a romance scammer's life. This one is fresh and still unfolding, but it's already hit an explosive level. Some details intentionally vague. Context. I'm a woman in my 30s with a reasonably good corporate-type job in a field with lots of room for growth, and am recently back into the dating scene after a decade. I'm kind of, would be a 10 if she lost 30 pounds looking girl. Beautiful face if a bit chubby, but I never have issues getting a date, lol. I'm not well off, but I'm stable and have a bit of spending money. I live in a large multicultural city, and my ex was an immigrant, so I'm open to dating people of any origin. If it wasn't abundantly clear, this bit about my appearance is a joke and only speaks to his failure to select an appropriate victim, I don't care what people think about how I look. What happened? A few weeks ago, I met a very charming man from a Latin American country, only a couple of years younger than me. Seemed very sweet, cuddly, intelligent, family-oriented, emotionally available, educated, and in a good profession back home in his country, and had a lot in common with me. Chemistry seemed amazing inside and outside the bedroom. He was honest that he was in my country on a tourist visa, but hoping to stay. I made it clear I wouldn't be able to help him with that, but we'd have a fun summer fling while he was here. If he managed to stay or come back, only then would we consider a real relationship. Then the other shoe dropped. A couple weeks in, and 4 dates in, during a text conversation about my work, he asked me to be his sugar mommy. I initially laughed and assumed it was a joke. He kept pushing, and clearly said it wasn't. Of course, feeling insulted by this, I went off on him. He maintained it as a serious ask until I hit a nerve with my complaints about how embarrassed he should be to ask me that. Then he got angry and insulted me for thinking he was serious about it. No apology for being hurtful to me. Obviously, what I did next was take screenshots and cry about it to my closest friends. I was hurt that I was fooled into thinking he liked me and that he thought I needed to pay for a man. My friends started to fuse on what happened next. One of my friends started snooping more on his online presence. Together we found about 6 different Instagram accounts that were him using different variations of his name and different photos of himself, all uploaded in batches. On Facebook, a similar pattern, all very scammy and suspicious looking. He'd been foolish enough on one of his profiles though to follow and tag the employer that he was working for illegally on his tourist visa in my country. So I contacted another close friend in a local law enforcement agency that works with immigration. She looked up his file. He had a wife and a daughter at home. I released the hounds after that. The friend who helped me investigate online made several group chats on multiple platforms with all of his family, immediate and extended, and friends. She released all the screenshots as well as a rant about how shameful it was. As they started blocking her, she added more people. I found his sister's phone number. She sent her messages on there too. Everyone he knows, including his wife, now know he's unfaithful and trying to take advantage of women. 30 minutes after the online bombardment started, I got a rude message from him about how I should be smart enough to know he was joking and he didn't need to sell himself. I didn't reply. The next step, online immigration reporting form with all the info we found. Work info, employer name and address, his home address, full name, date of birth, photos, screenshots admitting to working. Usually these reports take months to be reviewed, if at all, but I gave the file number to my law enforcement friend. 2 days later, law enforcement officers visited him at his home. They found him with a phone number that was issued to a local resident. All his roommates also had numbers issued to the same person, a direct link to the employer. He received a caution for trying to scam me, a no-contact order, and a flag on his immigration file that, based on his country of origin, will likely mean he can never return, as well as a strict warning to not work without authorization. His roommates also received warnings. His employer received a visit next. They found significant proof that they'd been employing him illegally, as well as multiple other people. Their investigation is still ongoing, but so far, they are likely to receive tens of thousands in fines or possible jail time. The guy isn't getting deported because the government would have to pay for it, and proceedings take longer than his remaining visa time, but he's now upgraded from a flagged file to a multi-year ban on re-entry to my country. If he bothers me again, though, he will be deported as well. Hope he enjoys going back to his angry wife and the ridicule from everyone he knows. See you again, never. So this is known as a pig butchering scam, and John Oliver actually has a really good segment on this. These are oftentimes a lot worse, and sometimes there are cases where even the scammers are victims in this scenario, usually due to human trafficking. It can get messy. And I would highly recommend watching that video because it talks about the warning signs, it talks about what to look for, and it also goes over just how fucked up these can be. And oftentimes, both people involved in the scam, the scammer and the scammy, are the victims, and it's the person who is employing the scammer that has all the power. Hey, welcome to the outro. Don't forget this whole thing is basically brought to you by GamerSupps. If you like caffeine, then I can't recommend GamerSupps enough. Use code OZ at checkout to support the channel. And I do actually use this product. It's replaced all other sources of caffeine for me because I feel good. It doesn't have any of that extra stuff that a pre-workout blend might have. It's with a couple of the extra things to make it so you don't crash as hard. It's good. I like it. Personally, if you really want a good flavor, try the Soda Pressing Pear or even the Dragon Fruit Punch. Those two are my personal favorites right now.